in my favorite section, the hearts and minds section, where we bring on some experts from different fields so that they can illuminate what they're thinking and feeling, how they're thinking about the future, what they actually do. And the first person I am honored to and grateful to introduce is Maryam Banikarim. So,
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Maryam. Maryam, you have this new job, right?
I do.
You're the head of marketing of Nextdoor. So what is Nextdoor?
So Nextdoor was basically created to be a technology platform to help you connect to your neighbors using technology as a tool, but really with the goal of getting you to connect with them offline, in person, right? So Pew data showed that more and more people, as we've progressed as a society, we've become more isolated and lonely. And one of the side effects of all of this great technology is that we're connected virtually, but actually we miss the real life human connections, right? And so that was the impetus that started Nextdoor as a product. And
This was started before the coronavirus, right? Like when was it started?
Yeah. I want to say like 10 or 11 years ago. So it's been around for a while. And, we basically are now in 11 countries, including the US, and we're in pretty much every neighborhood of the US specifically. And what's comes in full relief actually in moments like this is how much being connected to your neighbors matters, right? And that used to be something that I think we all understood as a culture. And in fact, it's interesting, I read a book Sebastian Unger wrote called Tribe, and he talks about how in the early days, people were connected to their tribe based on geography. And I think as the world sort of progressed, we all got more gated. And there's an increasing need for humans to actually be connected in person. And that's really what Nextdoor tries to drive.
Well, how is that working right now? Because we're all being socially distanced. We're staying in our apartments. And I know we're neighbors, Maryam, right?
Yeah.
You live right down the street from me in Chelsea.
I do. I mean, one of the interesting things is that, in some ways when you're in a crisis like this one, particularly now that we're socially distancing, proximity becomes even more important, right? Like, I think when coronavirus broke out about 4 weeks ago, sort of in a real meaningful way, what you began to see for us was, okay, we needed to make sure that you got relevant information from trusted sources in your feed, right? Because when you get on Nextdoor, you're basically seeing your neighborhood. So I live in Chelsea in New York, as Brad mentioned. I get to see Chelsea, but I see sort of my broader neighborhood being downtown. And so we partnered with the CDC and the World Health Organization, and depending on the market we're in, with the Red Cross, to make sure that we were getting you trusted information about what was going on. But then the thing that was incredible on the platform that really began to show up was the number of people who began to raise their hand to help. As it became clear that it was going to be more difficult for people to get out of their homes, people were like, I'm able-bodied, I can run groceries, I can pick up pharmacies for you. And these were like people just offering to help people they didn't know, right? Like on a platform that they trust, because we go through a pretty high verification process to make sure that you are who you say you are and that you do live within that community. But nonetheless, these were strangers offering to help strangers. And I think if there is a silver lining, there is that human kindness that is showing up on the platform in a real way.
That's amazing. And use the term hyper local. I mean, we've been all talking about, connecting people on a mass level. And this is why I'm excited to have Sarah on with you and all of us, because Sarah, and I'll get to Sarah in a second, wrote an amazing piece for the Harvard Business Review on what she calls digital campfires, right? Where people, and I'll let Sarah explain it a little bit more, congregate socially, digitally, really. So you're more of a offline, online kind of platform in a sense.
Yeah, right? I mean, listen, as a parent of two kids, one 18, one 21, Sarah, I had a chance to read your document and loved reading it. I think what we're about is basically connecting you physically to what many people, a lot of researchers call your weak ties, right? So not like your best friend or your kid, but sort of the person who gives you coffee in the morning at Joe's coffee shop, right? And I think we just moved back. So we've been in Chelsea for 20 years. I remember when we moved in, I just had a newborn. We moved into Chelsea, and one of the first things I did was I joined our block association, which would make my teenagers, I guess they're slightly older than teenagers, eyes roll like, oh, of course you did, Mom. And then I signed up to be the secretary of the block association because I liked the idea of getting to know my neighbors. It was inherently something I live downtown for a reason. I sort of find they're my tribe. And so, yes, I wanted to be connected to them. And I think one of the things about being back is one of my favorite things is there's a woman named Joan and her husband, Bob. They're in their 80s. Joan's a regular at 7 a.m. at Joe's coffee shop on 23rd. And when we were not socially distancing, and Joan was like the mayor of Chelsea, right? She connected everyone. You sat down and then all of a sudden I got to know Conrad, who taught about composing music at Juilliard, and, Nathaniel down my block who walks his 2 little Yorkies. And so the thing that's amazing is like Joan was sort of this epicenter. And then right after New Year's, she actually had an open house at her apartment. And everybody you turned to in the apartment, you were like, how do you know Joan? And it was like, oh, through Joe's coffee shop. And literally like that was Joan. And she was sort of, she's amazing. And so we've all now connected on Nextdoor, and we compare notes. And she says to me, oh, I can't leave the house. Bob doesn't want me to leave the house. I'm ordering from such and such place in terms of getting, groceries. And we check in just to make sure she's doing okay, right? I think the way help is showing up, or the way kindness is showing up, is from things like people saying, my kid has a birthday and he can't actually have people come over and celebrate. And for a kid, that's really disheartening, right? And so would you mind showing up and honking your horn between this window? And people literally will do that for people they don't know, right? And you're seeing that kindness really show up on the platform globally. I mean, there's a campaign where people are sort of doing a scavenger hunt and suggesting that you put a bear in your window. And we're seeing this globally, where you can go around in your car looking for this as a way to sort of entertain kids and really just give people hope, right? In a time where it can be quite difficult. And so I think you're seeing kindness show up in lots of different ways. And I think in the last couple of weeks, really what's been interesting to see on the platform, again, globally, is people focus on their local businesses. Because I think of Nextdoor as a way for you to check in on your neighborhood, right? And so your neighborhood is composed of your physical neighbors, your local businesses, sort of the national brands that are there, and then public agencies, right? And so guess what? We're all concerned about all those local restaurants and stores that really make up and give the flavor to our neighborhood, who are having a hard time surviving, given that they are going to have cash flow issues because people aren't showing up on a day-to-day basis. And so people have mobilized on the platform to say, you know what, my sister actually forwarded one to me in Brooklyn, where there's a guy who runs a bagel shop, and people are basically saying, on your way to the grocery shop, stop by, buy bagels, and have him send it to emergency workers or people working in the hospital, right? It's a way to keep him going, and it's a way to support and give back to people who are, really doing these vital jobs, right? We talk about unsung heroes. And so you're beginning to see that on the platform, people doing GoFundMe campaigns, gift cards, as a way to really support their neighborhood favorites, right? Because we all know that in order to survive and get to the other side, we need those businesses to thrive. So I think what's amazing is like really the breadth of the neighborhood. And that's really what Nextdoor is about.
So you live in Chelsea. I live in New York. I'm actually in Connecticut in my brother's house right now. There are many people who either don't live in cities or they have left their cities.
Yeah.
How can they use the platform where, I guess people live in neighborhoods, they might already have their relationships, or they're isolated, they're in the country. How do you suggest that they use the platform Nextdoor during this crisis?
Well, so it's interesting. So, I have friends who left the city. We hunkered down in our house in Chelsea, and, they're still connected. In fact, I got an email
True New Yorker.
True, this is my home. And I will say, like, I got a text from a friend who actually is in LA with her family, but their main home is here. And she said that she was on Nextdoor and had noticed that somebody she knew posted that her and her husband had been diagnosed with coronavirus, but they had a dog and they couldn't actually walk the dog. And so they were looking for somebody to help walk the dog. And she basically recognized the person and coordinated to have her dog walker go walk their dog. Right. So she's staying in touch with her community, even though she's not physically here at the moment, and she's helping problem solve. And it was so funny because I said to her, she produces Project Runway. I was like, wait a second, you're in my neighborhood because I saw that. And so that's how we knew that we were both actually looking at the same thing and we're in the same neighborhood. Right. She was like, oh, I didn't realize you lived in Chelsea. I was like, that's hysterical. So, you know, people, you know, the other thing I'm finding is like people will post for their parents. So a woman actually posted in Chelsea saying that her mother lives here and that she'd started the Nextdoor account for her mother. And really she was worried about her mom because she's not close by and she wanted to have a way to be able to have somebody go check on her. And so she was sort of posting through her mother on the platform, and her mother was feeling quite isolated, right? And so a lot of people weighed in saying like, there's online classes, by the way, there's culture class, right? I mean, there's other ways to be engaged and not feel so lonely.
All right, I know you have to run. So grateful. There was just this great New York Times piece written about Nextdoor. I put it in the chat if anybody wants to read it. And Maryam, you wrote a piece for Adweek about what's called Communities Are Coming Together at a Distance, and brands should support that. We've been talking a lot about how you connect with your consumers, your customers in this time. So we don't have time to discuss it clearly, but
I'm going to leave you with one thing. And you know, I think this has come into real relief for me. I think, you know, people say like, how should brands show up now? And I think this is a time to show up and actually solve somebody's need in a real actionable way. I mean, it's great to do pretty pictures, but really what matters is being there for someone when they need you, right? And there are real needs. And if you can connect with people and actually act on that, those are the brands and businesses that are going to actually survive and gain real loyalty on the other side of this, which will come because history shows us that we always get there.
Right. Well, that's why I do my brand saviors and stinkers piece, because some are really just showing that they're selling too much by, you know, surreptitiously,
consumers are smart enough to be able to parse that, right? So I think being there, supporting, and doing it in an authentic way, like people are going to remember. I think a great example, Brad, is you opening up. No, you opening up this class, right? In this moment, it's not about just revenue. It's actually about being there for other people. And so that matters. So, I mean, thank you so much.
Also for your employees too,
and
right?
100% for your
employees.
You're shitty to your
employees, that's going to ruin your brand and you suck and nobody's going to use you anymore.
That's correct.
Anyway, love you, Maryam.
I'm sorry I have to run, Sarah. I really was looking forward to hearing you, but I did get a chance to read your article.
It's such a great example of a digital campfire, so it's actually a perfect segue, but we'll chat later.
Okay, well, thanks again for having me.
And you'll get the video like everybody else.
Perfect.
So this is a great segue into Sarah.
Bye, guys. Thank you.